Something is coming. The chatter has begun to ramp up again. And looking at all of the sources, the intelligence sources, it's looking like the next 6 months to 9 months, there's going to be some event in Venezuela, or regarding Venezuela. Militarily, that is. This is a picture of a joint op of Argentina, Peru, Brazil, and the United States. There's a website known as Diálogo Americas, and it's a military magazine website that basically deals with issues of interoperability and joint operations. It's a lot dry stuff, but recently, in fact today, if you go to the website, the top 7 stories and the stories along the ticker across the top all have to do with either Venezuela or Nicaragua, or some type of interdictory action in the works. Now, I didn't want to say it at the time, but I really honestly think that the designs for this effort were originally slated to go down late 2017. And something happened that threw a monkey wrench into the works, and that was this. This is picture of Hurricane Maria that decimated Puerto Rico. Now you might ask, what does that have to do with the issue in Venezuela? Well, Puerto Rico was going to be the jumping off point. It was going to be the logistical support point. It was going to be pivotal in the invasion, and it would of course be the place that forces from DC could operate and have 100% assurance of OPSEC, operational security. Not so much in Colombia. And in 2018, we saw all of these attempts to try to get Brazil, to get Colombia to agree, and they wouldn't do it because they know their people aren't behind it. And so that all fell apart. Now this guy here on the left, Rossello, and this is Ledesma. He was the mayor of Caracas in Venezuela. On the lam, criminal. This is something they haven't given up on. And this is no lie. This is right from Diálogo Americas. Quote, crisis in Venezuela must be dealt with like in World War II. Now, I want everyone to just stop and take a breath for a minute and think about this. They are equating Venezuela to Nazi Germany when they went into Poland and they began to invade country after country after country. Venezuela's never invaded anybody. Venezuela's never threatened to invade anyone. They've never even closed their borders. What is the big story, the big narrative that DC likes to run out about all of the millions that have left Venezuela? Don't quote-unquote dictators usually close their borders? And I have another question for you too. One second. Let me see if I can get the right picture up here. You see, I talked about this date last year, January 11th, 2019. This is when random guy named Juan made his first appearance. They stood up this random guy who was educated in DC and just declared that he was the leader of Venezuela, and we all know how embarrassingly that failed. I mean, I was embarrassed for them. It looked so bad. But the reason that was necessary was because of this. You see, they run out this word dictator. Nobody ever used the word dictator prior to about 2014. Why? Because the current leader of Venezuela stood for an election that was recognized by our country, the whole world, as free and fair, and it was very, very close. And the DC representative, Enrique Capriles Radonsky, lost. So the reason January 11, 2019 was important was because that was the end of that election. Now there was another one. And the opposition, the people that were trying to overthrow Nicolas Maduro, begged the international community to not send representatives, to not send representatives to look at the election. Because then they could just allege, yeah, it was fake and fraudulent, and there would be no one to say one way or the other. Now, if you still believe this story about Nicolas Maduro being a dictator, I would like to slowly, once again, go through some things that I don't think most of you have heard. Now, let's start once again here. The first thing I'm going to address is, I know it's out there right now, what about all the starving people? All right. Venezuela imported for years most of its food. Now, how that came to be was it took decades for big oil in collusion with big banks to slowly move Venezuela away from being a self-sufficient agrarian society to being an oil-producing one. Now, it was a mistake that even the Venezuelan government, Chavez himself, admitted. Huge mistake, taking the revenue from the oil and importing 97% of their food. See, that's what the sanctions were. It banned and it prohibited businesses and our allies' businesses around the world from even dealing with Venezuela, allowing them to buy from them. Now, why do I bring up this chart, and what does it have to do with that? The price of oil collapsed in 2014 and 15. This is right when Chavez died. So not only were there sanctions that were prohibiting Venezuela from importing food, they had about, a tenth of the revenue that they had had just a year or two prior. Now, what caused this giant precipitous drop in oil, in the price of oil? Well, you can not listen to me. You can listen to Investopedia. The U.S., D.C., lifted its ban on selling domestically produced oil on the open markets. Now, why there was a ban to begin with goes all the way back to the 70s. It has to do with the Saudi oil embargo, all this kind of stuff. But what that ban didn't do, for that intervening 40 years, is it didn't ban big oil from going and pumping other people's oil and selling it on the open market. And that's what big oil did. Big oil just decided to go down to Venezuela and take advantage of their naivete and get them rooked into these horrible deals that enriched big oil and left the vast majority of Venezuela, penniless people of Venezuela, living at dirt scratch poverty levels. It got so bad that in 2000, the people of that country stood up and overthrew their two-party system. You see, they had a two-party system there too, like we have here. And Chavez, in a three-way race, won 60% of the vote just as a guy from the military. He had no control over the mechanics of the voting or the government at all. 60% of the people voted for him, and the remaining 40% voted for the other two parties. That's how bad it was. And when he took power in 2000, that's when things started to change drastically. That's right here, 2000. The price of oil, because of a lot of different factors, began to go up and up and up. This green line in the back is the revenue into Venezuela from oil. But look at their inflation rate. See, everybody says, oh, evil, terrible, horrible socialism causes huge inflation and all this. No, absolutely not. A massive amount of investment started going into the people of Venezuela. We had that happen in this country. It just happened at a different time. You think the interstate system was built for profit? Absolutely not. Most of the government organizations that protect you, OSHA and Fair Labor Wages Standards Act, all of these different things, that you just take for granted as an American were all the result of evil, terrible, horrible socialism. This little hiccup in 2008 was us being one of the primary purchasers of Venezuelan oil. We nearly collapsed our system, and if it hadn't been for QE1, QE2, QE3, big government socialism, we would be worse off today than Venezuela has ever been. But once again, even after that hiccup, up and up and up it went. And this is when, right here, 2014 and 15, DC decided to glut the world markets with oil and collapse the price, and simultaneously sanction Venezuela. So the little bit of tiny money they had, they couldn't buy food. They couldn't import food. And that's where the shortages came from. Now, Venezuela had planned for this. They knew it was coming. But they had a group called Fedecamaras, Fedecamaras. And what they did was they started hoarding groceries and not putting them on the shelves to cause fake shortages to drive the price up. So then Colombian black marketers came in, bought up the groceries, took them across the border to Colombia, and started basically exporting the Venezuelan bolivar out of the country, charging massive prices, but only accepting bolivars. And that's when the black market dollar stood up and everything went haywire. It has nothing to do with socialism other than DC and big oil doesn't like governments that take care of their people. That's the only argument you could make. And now, because everything else has failed, they are ramping up for a military intervention again. Here was the big lie. Remember when I said that DC in 2015 decided to lift the ban on exporting oil? See, many people didn't realize. They thought, oh, we're exporting oil. That they automatically assumed we had enough for ourselves and that we wouldn't be importing any oil. We are still, well, we're now the number 2 importer of oil in the world behind China. We're the number 1 exporter of oil and the number 2 importer of oil. Imagine the insanity that ensues from that. But this is what they said would happen if we lifted the ban. That we would see 90 cents or 80 cents less at the pump. What's the price of gas now? Nominal gas price in 1998 was $1 around. The average in 98 was $1.48. 2016 it was $1.87. Is it twice that now? See, when they said this and it dropped so precipitously in 2015, this has to do not with it being a good thing for America. It had to do with glutting the markets. And that was only a temporary stopgap to get the support they needed for this. But now they're going to go take it. Now that Puerto Rico has had a chance to rebuild and get back on its feet, so to speak. Now they have a logistical base from which to operate, which is what they were lacking right here. So keep your eyes open. They are trying to manipulate your mind. Chavez stood for and won 6 elections. He died. They tried to kill him 3 times while he was in office. And this isn't an R or a D thing. They're equally as corrupt and worthless. When he died, Maduro took over. Maduro didn't have to stand for an election, but he did anyway. And he won. And then he stood for another one. And he won. You can make believe all you want about, oh, it was fake and fraudulent and all this kind of stuff. If it was fake and fraudulent, think of the logic of your statement. Maduro was the hand-picked successor of Hugo Chavez, a guy who won 6 elections. The same people that supported Chavez supported him. Why didn't we hear the story through those years from 2000 to 2014? Why were there no invasions then? Why was there no talk of dictatorship and standing up random guys to be in charge then? When Chavez was winning election after election after election after election. Go look. Go look and see if you can find me articles that say the U.S. declares Venezuela's 2004 election fraudulent. You won't. Because whether you agree with them or not, that's what they chose. There was no fraud. DC's just controlling the narrative now. They're making a bunch of very limited intelligence people who support the current leadership believe something based on 150 character tweets. Trying to blame somebody who's not a dictator on a situation created by DC, the shortage of food. That's largely been taken care of now. You don't see the pictures anymore, do you? They try to run out ones from 4 and 5 and 6 years ago and try to tell you they're new. Do you really think the Chinese are that stupid? The Russians are that stupid? The Turks are all that stupid? If it was really a failed system where it was just some black hole of money, do you think they'd bother? I mean, if you want to talk about a black hole of money, they're not $23 trillion in debt, are they? Like we are. If you really want to talk about a black hole of money, I don't think Washington, D.C. can speak to anyone about that. Or lies, or extrajudicial killings, or keeping people off of social media. I'm sure there's a lot of YouTubers out there listening right now that would laugh if they heard our government, any government, RD, left, right, whichever one, talk about the censorship of media in any other country. That's flippin' hilarious. Ask Abby Martin about that. We have no place we have no standing, no moral authority. And if you think I'm kidding about the Constitution of Venezuela giving the resources of the people to the people, of the country to the people, I'll put a link down in the first pinned comment, and you can also read where they declare marriage to be between a man and a woman, and that children have a duty to take care of their parents, and that you have a right to raise your children with a religious education. It's in their Constitution. Is it in ours? No, it isn't. So when you see all the tranny nonsense and all the perversion and the garbage and the crap that gets allowed here, and with the blessing of our government, before you go casting stones and casting aspersions on the government down here, you should see the things that they stand against. Abortion being one of them. It's aberrant and disgusting. And that's the opinion of the vast majority of Central, Latin, South America. And I know this is 18 and a half minutes, but it's important because we have a government now in DC that is planning on sending military force and opening up and killing people over this. And a decision is going to have to be made by every American on this. And I guess I'll just leave it there. Like, share, subscribe.